Risk. Someone decided who carries it. And it wasn't you. Picture this. Tuesday morning. Coffee's still brewing. You open your retirement app, the one you've been quietly feeding for 15 years, $20 here, $50 there, every single paycheck without missing one. And you see a new holding. A company you never chose. A company you cannot vote in. A company you cannot sue. A company that will never pay you a single dollar in dividends. You didn't buy it, but you own it now. And the scariest part? It was never an accident. I know what you're thinking. That sounds insane. That sounds illegal. Stick with me, because not only did it happen, it was engineered to happen. Precisely, deliberately, and completely legally. And what I'm about to show you isn't really about one company or one IPO. It's about a rule. An unwritten rule that has governed wealth in this country for decades, but that, for the first time, was applied so openly, so visibly, so brazenly, that anyone paying attention could finally see the whole machine at once. That rule is about risk, about who carries it, and about who decided, a long time ago, that it wouldn't be them. If this is the kind of conversation you don't hear anywhere else, the honest version, the one that actually explains the mechanism, hit subscribe right now. I do this every week, and I promise you, it only gets more interesting from here. Before we get to the rule, I need to show you the normal version of how this is supposed to work. Because the contrast is everything. When a company goes public, when it does an IPO, the traditional idea is actually pretty straightforward. A business has been growing. It has revenue. It has, ideally, profits. It needs more capital to expand. So it opens itself up to public investors. Regular people. People like you. In exchange for your money, you get a share of the company, which means a share of the future profits, a vote in major decisions, and legal standing to hold management accountable. That's the deal. Risk, yes, but shared risk with shared upside. Think of it like buying into a restaurant. The place has been open 3 years. You've eaten there. The food is good. The owner shows you the books, real numbers, real margins. You give them money to open a second location. If it works, you both win. If it fails, you both lose something. But you knew what you were buying. You sat at the table. You read the menu. That's how it's supposed to work. What happened in June 2026 was something different. Something that looked like that restaurant deal on the surface. But underneath, the structure had been quietly, carefully rebuilt. The company in question had lost approximately $5 billion in the previous year. It was burning through cash at a rate that even a historic fundraise, the largest in IPO history, wouldn't fully cover through 2030. It carried around $29 billion in debt. It had never paid a dividend, and the shares being sold to the public came with no voting rights, meaning you could buy in, but you could never vote on a single decision. And here's the part that made financial and legal professionals stop and read the prospectus twice. Buried in the filing was a clause that said investors agreed, by purchasing shares, to resolve disputes through arbitration, waiving their right to sue the company or join a class action lawsuit. Let me say that again in plain language. You give them your money. You have no vote. You get no dividend. And if something goes wrong, if you believe you were misled, if the numbers turn out to be wrong, if the company makes decisions that destroy your investment, you cannot take them to court. You can complain to an arbitrator. Privately. With no public record. That's not a restaurant deal. That's buying a ticket to a show where you're not allowed to leave, you're not allowed to complain to management, and they already spent the ticket money before you sat down. And here's where it lands on your kitchen table. Because most Americans aren't buying individual stocks. They're putting money into index funds. Into their 401k. Into the S&P 500 ETF their HR department recommended when they started their job. They're doing what every financial advisor told them to do: diversify, automate, be patient. But index funds have rules. When a company becomes large enough, when its market capitalization crosses certain thresholds, the funds are required to buy it. Automatically. Without asking you. Without a vote among fund holders. SpaceX crossed those thresholds almost immediately after going public. Which means millions of Americans who never looked at a prospectus, never heard the arbitration clause, never chose to invest in this company, now own a piece of it. Through their retirement savings. Through the fund they've been trusting for 15 years. They didn't walk through the door. The door was moved around them. And we haven't even gotten to the scary part yet. Because everything I just described, the no-vote shares, the no-lawsuit clause, the forced index inclusion, those aren't bugs. They aren't oversights. They aren't things that slipped through because the regulators were busy. They are features. This is where the rule lives. The real one. The one nobody puts on a slide deck. Here it is, as plainly as I can say it. In the modern financial system, risk and reward have been deliberately separated. The people who build the upside, the early investors, the venture capital firms, the founders, the private equity partners who got in at $1 a share, they capture the gain. And then, at the moment of maximum valuation, they open the door to the public. Not because they need partners. Because they need someone to hold the bag while they walk out. I want you to feel this, not just understand it. Imagine a house. Someone buys it for $50,000 in a neighborhood nobody wanted. Over 20 years, they renovate it. The neighborhood transforms. The house is now worth $2 million. At that point, right at that point, they sell you a share of it. Not a controlling share. A share with no vote. With no right to sue if the roof caves in. And they take $20 billion out of the sale to pay off a loan they took out on a different property they also own. And they hand you the keys. That is not investing. That is a very elegant, very legal, very well-documented transfer of risk. From them to you. I want you to sit with that for 1 second. Because there's a word for the moment when a company stops needing believers and starts needing someone to absorb the downside. That word is public. Going public doesn't mean opening the doors to partners. It means finding someone to hold the weight while the people who built it walk out light. That's the moment. And you were never invited to it. You were scheduled for it. And here's what makes it architecture rather than accident. The arbitration clause didn't write itself. The dual-class share structure, where founders keep control even after selling to the public, didn't appear by accident. The timeline that allowed the company to jump into major indices within weeks of its IPO, rather than the traditional waiting period of years, was the result of rule changes that were specifically lobbied for, specifically advocated for, specifically designed to allow exactly this kind of transaction to happen at exactly this kind of scale. This isn't conspiracy. This is paperwork. Public paperwork. You can read it. The mechanism exists. The mechanism was built. And the mechanism worked exactly as designed. Risk went one direction. To you. Reward went the other direction. To them. Every single time. Now I want to give you 3 doors. Because when people understand the system, they usually ask the same question. Okay, so what do I do? And the honest answer is that there are 3 options. And every one of them is a trap. Door number 1. You don't invest. You keep your money in a savings account, in cash, under a mattress. You opt out completely. The cost is visible. Inflation. The dollar you have today buys less next year, and less the year after. If inflation runs at even 3% a year for 20 years, which is modest by historical standards, the purchasing power of your savings drops by nearly half without you doing anything wrong, without making a single bad decision. You just stood still. Opting out is not neutral. It has a price. It just gets paid slowly, quietly, in the grocery store, at the gas pump, in the gap between what your savings say and what your life actually costs. Door number 2. You do what everyone tells you to do. Index funds. Diversified. Automated. Patient. The responsible thing. And for a long time, this is genuinely good advice. Historically, it works. The market goes up over time. Compound interest is real. Dollar cost averaging is a legitimate strategy. But, and this is the part the brochures leave out, when you buy an index fund, you are not choosing what's in it. You are buying whatever the index contains. And the index contains whatever crosses the threshold. Which means that every rule change that allows a company to enter an index faster, at a higher valuation, with less scrutiny, every one of those changes flows directly into your retirement account. Without your knowledge. Without your consent. You thought you were buying a diversified basket of the American economy. You were. But someone else gets to decide what goes in the basket. And increasingly, what goes in the basket is being decided by people who benefit from putting it there. Door number 2 has a hidden cost too. You just don't see it until the basket tips over. Door number 3. You try to play the game like the insiders do. You research companies. You try to get in early. You look for the next big thing before it goes public. And here's the brutal truth about door number 3. By the time you hear about it, the game is already over. The venture capital firms got in at $1. The sovereign wealth funds got in at 10. The institutional investors got in at 50. By the time the company is on your newsfeed, by the time your broker app is sending you notifications about the IPO, by the time the price discovery is happening in public, the people who built the upside have already locked in their gains. You are not joining the game. You are the last round of the game. You are what makes their investment liquid. There's a word for that in finance. Exit liquidity. There's a simpler word for it too. 3 doors. Every one a trap. The inflation trap. The index trap. The late money trap. Now, and this is important, I am not saying there's a 4th door that fixes everything. I'm not going to do that to you. But I am going to say this. The first step out of any trap is knowing you're in one. Because if you don't know the structure, you can't make a real decision. You're just reacting. You're just hoping. And hope is not a financial strategy. I want to tell you about a man named Gary. Gary is 54 years old. He works in supply chain management in Columbus, Ohio. He's been at the same company for 19 years. He's not wealthy, but he's not poor either. He did everything right. He contributed to his 401k from his first paycheck. He increased his contribution every time he got a raise. He diversified into index funds because his HR department held a seminar in 2007 and a man in a nice suit told him that was the smart move. In 2008, Gary watched his retirement account lose 38% of its value in 14 months. He didn't panic. He didn't sell. He kept contributing. He trusted the system. He trusted that if he stayed patient, it would come back. It did come back. It took years, but it came back. By early 2026, Gary had rebuilt. More than rebuilt. His account was the largest it had ever been. He was starting to look at the numbers and think, maybe 5 more years. Maybe I can actually retire at 59. Not rich, but okay. Stable. After everything. Then, in June 2026, without Gary being asked, without Gary voting, without Gary even being notified in real time, the index funds inside his 401k began purchasing shares of a company valued at $1.75 trillion. A company that lost $5 billion the previous year. A company whose prospectus included a clause saying Gary could not sue them if things went wrong. Gary didn't know this. Gary found out the way most people find out, from a news headline, from a comment someone left on a YouTube video, from a coworker who mentioned it at lunch. He went home that night and opened his account app and looked at his holdings. And there it was. A small line. A small percentage. A new name he hadn't put there. Gary closed the app. Finished his coffee. Went to work. And the numbers behind that small new line in his account, numbers he'll probably never read, tell a story that I think everyone deserves to hear. Because this isn't about one man in Columbus. This is about the scale of what was built around people exactly like him. So let me give you the numbers. Not to overwhelm you, but because the size of this thing is part of the truth. Gary is not a character. Gary is a category. He's the auto worker who kept contributing through the recession. The teacher who chose the conservative fund option because she didn't want to take risks. The warehouse manager who started late but has been making up for it. The nurse who doesn't have time to read a prospectus because she's working double shifts. People who did everything right. People who trusted a system that was, quietly and structurally, designed to use their trust as a resource. People like you. SpaceX went public at a valuation of approximately $1.75 trillion. To put that in perspective, that's larger than the entire GDP of Australia. It's more than double what Google earns from advertising in a single year. It's a number so large that if you tried to count to it, one number per second, it would take you over 55,000 years. The company lost roughly $5 billion in the year before going public. Its total debt, including a $20 billion bridge loan used partly to refinance obligations connected to other entities, sits around $29 billion. The historic fundraise of $75 billion doesn't fully cover projected spending through 2030. And the revenue projections in the filing, the ones used to justify that $1.75 trillion valuation, include assumptions about markets that don't yet exist. Data centers in orbit. A global AI infrastructure business. A share of a market so large it approaches the size of the entire United States economy. I want you to notice something about how that feels when you hear it. Does it feel like a business plan? Or does it feel like a creative writing exercise? Because here's what's real right now, today, in 2026. The Starlink satellite internet business works. It generates real revenue. It serves real customers. That part of the story is legitimate. Everything else in the projected valuation is a bet on futures that may or may not arrive, priced as if they already have, sold to a public that by contractual agreement cannot hold the company legally accountable if they don't. And this is not the last time. OpenAI is watching. Anthropic is watching. Every major tech company still sitting in private hands, burning through venture capital, running on hype and the promise of an AI-powered future, every single one of them just got handed a blueprint. The blueprint says, wait until you're enormous. Wait until you're too big to be excluded from the major indices. Then go public at a valuation that prices in a future that hasn't happened yet. Lock in your legal protections. Collect the capital. Let the index funds do the rest. And who ends up holding the risk at the end of that process? Gary. And everyone like Gary. Every single time. Before we get to the part one think matters most, drop a like right now if something in this video landed differently than you expected. And tell me in the comments, did you know your index fund could automatically pull you into an IPO like this without asking? Because I read every single comment. And that conversation down there is always worth your time. Now I have to be honest with you about something. I'm not here to sell you gold. I'm not here to sell you a bunker, or a crypto wallet, or a $200 newsletter with a secret portfolio that beats the market. I don't have a product. I don't have a magic answer. Nobody does. Anyone who tells you they have a clean solution to this, a simple way to opt out, a guaranteed hedge, a 5-step system that protects you from what I just described, is selling you something. And the thing they're selling is probably just another version of the same machine. What I can give you is clarity. And clarity is worth something, even when it's uncomfortable. Maybe especially when it's uncomfortable. So here's what's true. The system I described, where risk flows to the public and reward stays with the insiders, has been operating for decades. It is not new. It is not unique to one company or one founder or one IPO. What is new is how visible it became, how documented, how openly it was engineered and then executed in plain sight, with legal filings that anyone can read. That visibility matters. Not because it changes the rules, it doesn't. Not because regulators will immediately step in, history suggests they won't, or at least not quickly. But because systems that operate on trust have a vulnerability. And that vulnerability is understanding. When enough people understand the structure has to change. Not because of anger. Not because of outrage. Because of behavior. Because people start asking different questions when they log into their 401k. Because fund managers start facing pressure from participants who know what they're buying. Because the next IPO prospectus gets read more carefully. Because the next arbitration clause generates a different conversation. The most powerful thing about an unwritten rule is that it only works on people who don't know it exists. You know it now. Risk. Who carries it is the whole story. It always has been. Sit with that. If this video changed how you think about where your money actually goes, leave a comment and tell me what hit hardest. Was it the index fund mechanism? The arbitration clause? The story of Gary? I read every single one. And the next video on your screen right now picks up exactly where this one left off. It's about what happens when the same blueprint gets applied to AI companies specifically, and why the timeline might be shorter than anyone is saying publicly. Click it. I'll see you there.